25, beginning at verse 14. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought another 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who'd received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you're a hard man, harvesting where you've not sown and gathering where you've not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I've not sown and gather where I've not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more. And whoever does not have, whatever he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is a well-known parable, and I'm sure we've all heard it before. And when I look at the parable, I think of 3 questions that come to my mind immediately. And can we have those 3 questions up then, please? And the 3 questions that I would ask as you read this parable is, was it fair? What was gained and lost? And what talents do we have? There's not much up on there, so we've got 3 questions. We've got 2 points on each question, so you'll see how we're getting along. So the first question is, was it fair? Was it fair that one person got 5, one person got 2, you go back, and one person only got 1? At first sight, you may think this isn't fair. We will look at what the talents that God has given us later. But I wonder, do you feel you're at the end of the queue when things were handed out? Do you look around at people who can seem to do so much better than you can, have so much more than you've got, and feel jealous? And as we look at this story, there are 2 things that we need to bear in mind. A talent, in biblical times, was a measurement of weight, not of monetary value. One commentary I read suggested it's about 75 pounds weight. It was commonly used for precious metals. A talent of gold would be worth a lot more than a talent of silver. But the most likely thing to apply here would have been a talent of silver. That was the most common use. of the term. And a talent of silver was worth about 20 years of a day labourer's wage. 20 years of a day's labour wage is one talent that this man received. Now, if you won £1 million on the lottery, how upset would you be that someone else had won 2 million? Or 5 million? I'm sure some people would. But this man who received the one talent received more money than he could possibly have imagined. He would have been among the super rich of his town or village. Far more than he could possibly have ever deserved or thought. In other contexts, we perhaps might call the giving of so much money grace. Something he didn't deserve, riches beyond his knowing. Secondly, we read that the master gave out this money to each person according to their abilities. I may think I would like to have been more handsome, more wealthy, more famous than I have been, but I wonder how well I would have coped with it. How many people who are so handsome, wealthy, famous, or all three, actually seem happy? How many people can cope with the pressures and the temptations that some of these things that we all want will bring? In 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13, we are told God is faithful, so he will not allow you to be tempted or tested beyond what you are able to endure, and he will provide the way of escape. Sometimes we're not given what we think we might like because God knows that we couldn't handle it. And God knows us better than we know ourselves. God still gives us more than we deserve, more than we could possibly imagine. But he only gives us what we have the ability to use properly for him. And he asks that we use it to the best of our ability. He doesn't expect those who have little to produce for him as much as those who have much. And there is a responsibility for, when we look at what we have, that we should use it for him. So in summary, was it fair? Was it fair? Give the next slide. All got a lot, far more than they could have expected, and they were only expected to manage what they got according to their abilities. So the next question comes up: what was gained and what was lost? I'm reminded of the story of a minister who went to Spain for a week's holiday, and on his return his members asked him how he got on. Well, he said, the flight was just like being in church. Oh, they said, you mean you were flying up, nearer the heavens, nearer to God? No, he said, a whole crowd of people came in and they all sat down facing the front. Someone up the front told them what they needed to know. Then they all sat back and a very small number of people rushed around serving and doing everything. Yes, he said, just like the church. We know it's true, don't we, in most churches, that a few people do most things. And nowhere is it truer to say than in a church that if you want something done, go and ask a busy person. And we can think on this as we look further into our story today. What was gained by these people. At first sight, we seem to have a biblical affirmation that the more people do, the more they should do. The more they have, the more they get given. And that is partly true. The man who had 5 talents doubled it to 10, doubled his workload, doubled his responsibility. The master came back and gave him 10% more. But this is far from the message of the whole Bible. The Bible does talk about giving and taking proper rest, and everyone sharing the load. And a widespread biblical context that if we had more time, we could stop and look at those. Most sermons I've heard, and I've heard a few over my years, on this parable, focus very much on the master saying, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Wouldn't it be great if Jesus was saying that to each of us here and now? Wouldn't it be great if, when our time comes to stand before him, he says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant"? But the next bit is what I want to concentrate on today. He said, "Come and share your master's happiness." The praise and the promise was the same to the man who turned 5 into 10 as to the man who only turned 2 into 4. Each man worked according to what he was given and according to the abilities that he had. And each received the same praise. It's not the amount of the end result, it's doing the best with what they were given. And what a gain they made. Come and share the master's happiness. If I asked everyone what they want today, top of everybody's list should be happiness. And the only happiness that really counts is when we come and share God's happiness. The happiness. And that's what he offers. Come and share the master's happiness. Other Bible passages support both of these points of what is gained. Labourers were taken to work in the vineyard. Some worked all day. Some worked half a day. Some a couple of hours. And some only an hour. They all got the same, a full and generous day's wage. No one got less than they deserved. All were treated generously. All received a gracious payment. Unfortunately, all was not well in our parable, and the man who didn't do his best was thrown out. He did not share the master's happiness. And a reminder here, we aren't just talking about when we die and go to heaven or go to stand before God. The kingdom of God is here and now. The Master today wants us to share his happiness today in all we do. So, summary. What was gained and lost? When we use to our best of our abilities what we're given, we are encouraged to do yet more. God didn't say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant, go sit down and have a rest." He said, "Well done, come and share in my happiness of the things that we're doing." And we are given enough to share in God's happiness. So, what talents do we have? This parable does well because of the double meaning of the word talent, doesn't it? The talent, as we've seen, was a unit of weight in Bible times. But if we talk about talents today, we talk about our abilities to do something, don't we? And I'm sure this is not an accident when the Bible was written and translated. And so what are our talents that the Master has given us to use? Our money, our time, our abilities, our compassion, our prayers. The list is endless because he's given us so much. And Jesus is challenging us all this morning to use all of these and more to gain a share of his happiness. It's worth just going back to the first century and thinking what the first hearers of this parable would have recognized too. The lazy and wicked man would undoubtedly represent and include the Pharisees. They had, by their own claims, the message of God. But instead of spreading it freely, they buried it. They buried it in petty rules and regulations. They buried it to make it inaccessible to anyone but the chosen few, when it was meant for the whole world. And we need to remember this morning that whilst all those other things are important, what this parable is really about is using the gift of the gospel that God has given us. It's in the sharing of God's love that we truly share in the happiness of the Master. The happiness that is the love beyond all understanding, that nothing can overcome, that nothing can take away. We want to strive for that happiness this morning, a happiness that nothing can take away. God promises us this for eternity, but he also promises it for today and tomorrow. He wants us to experience it now. He wants to say to each one of us, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Come and share my happiness." As we move to the communion table, we're going to sing a communion hymn, "Behold the Lamb."